Welcome everyone to a remote version of hashtag Real Talk podcast with me, your extraneous. I should have thought of the adjective that I wanted to use before I hit record. Aaron Bragg here reporting live from GrrCon 2025. I have a special guest with me today. We're going to be talking about safe security, third-party risk, AI security, a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm going to be quiet for a minute. Yes, believe it or not, I'm going to be quiet for a minute to let you introduce yourself to all the listeners.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, good afternoon. My name is Shelly Migliore, and I'm a solutions architect at SAFE. I've recently joined SAFE in the past 6 months, but I'm no stranger to the space. So I actually got my start in cybersecurity, more in the sec and DevOps space, and then transitioned more into GRC. So I actually worked at Comerica Bank directly for our CISO. So if you're a Detroiter in Auburn Hills, you know very much about Comerica Bank. So got a really good taste of the CISO challenges that they face between security and the risk team, and then spent some time at EY building risk programs for various financial institutions. Spent some time at Archer, which is a legacy GRC provider, but ultimately wanted to get back to my roots in cybersecurity, which brought me here to SAFE today.
Excellent. I won't hold it against you when you said EY,
Oh
because
gosh.
I have an interesting relationship with like the big four. So let's just say sometimes they do great, sometimes they don't. All right, but that's not why we're
Okay,
here to
we're
talk
not
about.
holding against
We're
me.
talking about third-party risk and rethinking. So I'm going to start off with an easy question.
Okay.
What are you seeing in the field right now when it comes to like third-party risk, especially in the world of AI?
Yeah. So the benefit of going towards an AI model is obviously scale. So there's not many requests that are coming in from your business counterparts that don't have to involve IT, right? Usually everything is impacting IT. And there's a lot of documents and information, policies, questionnaires, things that, need to be reviewed, in which, if you're a small team and third party is maybe, part of your job, maybe a half day of your job, that, there's a lot of manpower that's needed. So there's a big interest in moving towards AI to help scale the operations that are already in place.
So one of the things that I may or may not know about your company,
Okay.
not giving away any secrets,
Yeah.
is that automation is coming into play, right? So we're in a position to where, especially like at Corewell Health, where we have a smaller risk team,
Yeah.
we're being asked to do more with less, especially healthcare, not even counting the crazy budget stuff that may happen
Right.
next year. We have a small risk team. All of these different areas of the business are coming to ask us for help with risk assessments, right? Because our risk leadership has done a great job of making sure that risk is interjected in all parts of the business, to the point where now we have a maturity model, it's the first thing they can do, right?
Right.
Like you want to do app onboarding, risk assessment, reaching out to our risk team is one of those very first things. However, as they've branched out into more areas of the business, especially the clinical side, the demand is like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I think the backlog they have a huge backlog. What can be done with like automation, or going with like with a helper like a safe security, to help bring that load more manageable?
Yeah. The beauty about cyber, maybe compared to some of our other broader operational risk, is that it is a bit more standardized and codified. We have standardized control frameworks. We have, standard information documents that we typically look for in this process. We have things like SOC 2 and trust centers, where regardless of the industry, you leverage IT and you're leveraging those types of frameworks. So because of that codification, that standardization, we can actually train AI models on that. So specifically at SAFE, we have SOC 2 parsing, we have agentic AI that's focused specifically on parsing trust centers, so we can get a head start on some of those more framework, codified, publicly available information, so you're not necessarily waiting on the vendors to give you that. We can start to feed that information into your assessments even before you have a vendor response.
Which is something I didn't think about, right? In the offensive security world, for everybody that knows, there's open source intelligence, right? Like there's that public information out there that is accessible, to where you may, not using a pseudo competitor,
Yeah.
but like your traditional risk recons that are kind of like point in time risk assessments.
Right.
What I want to know a little bit more is you were talking about agentic AI and having it be a little more fluid. I don't know if that's the right term, right?
Sure.
I'm trying to think of like the right term because obviously risk is a point in time, but that it could change like the next day.
Yeah.
So I guess what would be an advantage of your platform
Sure.
when it comes to stuff like that?
Yeah, so I mean, you've got the security monitoring piece, which a tool like RiskRecon is, in which we can leverage AI and kind of that continuous monitoring and outside-in scanning to help us identify threats and vulnerabilities. But the unique thing at Safe and just any risk program that's looking to differentiate, go to the next level, is you can't just monitor. You need to align it to the impacts to your business and how it impacts your business. So aligning those vulnerabilities to controls and then to risk frameworks. So not only are we doing continuous monitoring when it comes to your outside-in scanning and getting the latest and greatest there, we're taking that information and mapping it back to business context and risk that makes sense to your business. So not only are we getting those feeds, again, from a security standpoint, we're able to translate that back into live updates of, what are your top 3 risks and how are your outside-in scans performing against those top 3 risks. So again, it's not just the vulnerability security monitoring state, it's transforming that, translating that to controls frameworks that make sense to your organization as well as risk frameworks that make sense to your business context and organization.
Now, the camera might explode because we're gonna do something kind of
Are we gonna nerd out?
oh my gosh, what is Inception? Right? I was
Oh
trying
God.
to think of the movie where it's like down in there. You talked a little bit about using AI, agentic AI, in a very specific way.
Hmm.
Now, one of the things that we talked about in CloudCon when I had my chief privacy officer and my deputy chief privacy officer there in a session, people were talking about AI and the fact that it's adapting all of the time. Businesses are using it in a different way. You might do a risk assessment on this tool only to find out later that they've bought somebody else, right, that's using this, or they've added a new feature that's going to bring AI into it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on revisiting different risk assessments based on the fact that they're using AI?
Yeah. So, in the sense of revisiting maybe the way that you used to do things and introducing AI, is that kind of like what you're
Yeah,
gleaming
yeah.
at? Yeah. I mean, again, I think a lot of my customers, whether I'm at more of a GRC stance or security stance, they're all looking for the easy button. Right, but when it comes to introducing AI, I always try to remind that it's really an efficiency tool. It's to help you maybe do your job faster, better, kind of help you scale. But you still need to be involved in terms of reviewing the quality, ensuring it makes sense to your business context. So I mean, there's a lot of different ways in which you can leverage AI, and that AI model might get better with time. The more prompts, the more data that you introduce to it, we're continuously evolving our AI at Safe. But in terms of, replacing assessments, introducing, AI to that, as long as you have a culture that it's not an easy button and that it's meant to help aid your job, not replace your job, help you scale, help you get more information at scale, you as a human still need to make human decisions regarding that risk.
Is that something to where you think we need to revisit like risk and compliance alerts? Right? So the sense where you do have we'll take Microsoft for
Yeah.
example. They love to do this, right? Is they have your risk team has vetted this tool that's going to be used this way. Oh, we have a new feature coming out that's going to be on by default, not off by default.
Right.
On by default. Recall. Let's use Microsoft Recall, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a good example. What suggestions would you have for businesses out there that is there a way to like trigger, hey, something in your feeds has changed, maybe we need to reevaluate that particular risk?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can have those kind of nagging notifications to help make sure that you're staying on top of things, maybe in a more proactive and less reactive state. But I think, so another part of my background is, kind of helping build risk quantification models. Another reason why SAFE is unique is they specialize in CRQ. And a lot of my customers
Oh,
think,
use an acronym.
CRQ,
What's CRQ?
cyber risk quantification. So that means instead of your qualitative assessments with your high, medium, low and your heat matrices, that we're moving towards more explicit terms, so likelihood and loss magnitude and financial terms, which we think are kind of agnostic of, whether you're working in IT or the business, we all understand dollars and cents. So cyber risk quantification or risk quantification of your assessments can be a very important component. And the reason I brought that up is because, going back to those nagging notifications and the use of AI and triggers about new things showing up in your environment, I think those things are important efficiency tools, but it all comes back to, what are you looking for? How are you defining the program? And when it comes to doing something like risk quantification, the feedback I always got from my customers was, I'm not mature enough, I don't have the data, I don't have the alerts, I don't have the metrics, I don't have the inputs, when really what is needed is context on what you're looking for. So what is your governance framework? What are your key risks that are meaningful to your company's objectives and business objectives? So, these things need to go in hand. You need to have operational tools that give you efficiencies, but you also need to know what you're looking for.
Do you think that with risk quantification, is that something to where when you speak to the business side of things, right? Like I'm a salesperson, right? I want to justify this spend.
Yeah.
Are you starting to see traditional non-IT, non-digital service leaders start to see that quantification can help them understand that risk value more?
Absolutely. A lot of my customers, whether they're doing it today is a different question, but they want it, right? They're all saying that, even if they're not saying the word cyber risk quantification or quantification, they say that they want to use metrics to inform risk assessments. They want better metrics. They want calculated risk scoring. And ultimately, what they're asking for is risk quantification. They want more explicit values to not, again, be the easy button, but to be better conversation starters.
Can you give, like, what would be a good example of that, right? So
Yeah.
we're going to pick on CVSS
Oh,
scoring,
yeah.
right? So in the past, when you're dealing with risk and vulnerability management, it would be like, oh my gosh, this thing is a 10 out of 10. You got to patch this immediately, even though it could be literally connected to a PACS imaging system.
Right.
I know all about that. But yet we have to take into account like business impact and other things. What's a good example of where you could use that to say, okay, hey, moving beyond CVS, like we looked at, yes, it's in your network, it's not internet exposed, so that drops the scoring down, but this business we plan to acquire someone else,
hmm
and that is going to come into play, right? Because
Right.
that's where I think there's a blind spots in a little bit when it comes to CBS.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually spoke to a prospect this morning that's kind of part of that 1.5 line, right? Like they're more DevSecOps, they're not necessarily first line because they're, kind of IT and we're a little bit more mature, but they're not officially the second line, right? So they don't own the risk program per se. And a lot of their challenge is taking, vulnerabilities to governance committees to get the business who actually own the apps to pay for their crap versus having it be IT burden. So the burden on IT is that usually they're trying to justify why we should patch these things, why it's important, why the business should fund these things. And ultimately, there's not, typically there's a misalignment, right? You've got this really technical explanation of this vulnerability without a clear understanding of, the impact to the business. And so, yes, there are things in which you can attach vulnerabilities to confidentiality scoring and bringing in things like business impact assessments to understand, if this vulnerability, manifests, what could be the impact to the business. But another angle to that, and a way that we do that really beautifully at SAFE, is we leverage the FAIR methodology, which is factor analysis of information risk. It's an open source risk quantification framework. So that gives us kind of our model for performing the risk quantification. And then the second layer to that is we have mapped in expected control frameworks that also map to MITRE, threat attack, and vulnerability frameworks. So it's one thing to focus on your daunting list of vulnerabilities, but if you can express that in, hey, we've got these key controls we have to focus on, here's kind of the impact if we don't prioritize these key controls, and therefore the risk impact, that can tell maybe a more legible story for those that maybe don't understand vulnerabilities and the impacts of those, not patching those vulnerabilities.
I just realized I do have a follow-up question to
Okay,
that,
go
but I
ahead.
totally forgot to put my disclaimer at the beginning, because as our little podcast has grown and we get lots of more viewers, uh, my legal team is making me say the opinions express
Oh, okay.
the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are not necessarily those of my awesome employer, Corewell Health, even though most of the time we are aligned. So I had to say that part out there. Now,
Okay.
going back to my follow-up question for you,
Okay.
you brought up something that triggered. So currently, right now, I'm doing security advisor work on a FinOps project,
Okay.
right? So our company's getting into the FinOps model because it's going to be so important with cloud. What you made me think about when we were talking about like quantification is around, wait a minute, can all of this tie back into a FinOps model? So remember, I'm new to the FinOps world. I do see the business value in it, but I didn't realize until just now with you're talking about, like, this could be important to building or even maturing your FinOps program. So I guess what would be some good advice about tying it back into FinOps?
Yeah. The good thing with SAFE is through the FAIR methodology and the FAIR-CAM framework, I mean, it's a matter of integrating with your vulnerability scanning tools. You still need to do CS or CVSS scoring, right? That's industry standard. That's your, kind of run. I call that run the bank because I have a banking background. That's running the organization, type of activities where it doesn't really make sense to necessarily quantify at that level, probably. But in the grander scheme of running the business, running the bank, running the hospital, you can start to leverage risk quantification because it speaks directly to your chief financial officer, right? If they have to hand out money to all of the business areas that need investment or find opportunity, that's the language that they're naturally speaking. So the FAIR-CAM framework, again, naturally is mapped to MITRE attack. It naturally maps to your vulnerability scan information and aligning kind of those vulnerabilities to an expected control framework. So where that vulnerability mapping makes sense, we can show where that expected control failure is. And maybe in certain instances, you're doing fine on patching. It's not to say that you might not have medium or critical vulnerabilities, but maybe in the essence or the grand scheme of things, there are other priorities. So that's the type of transition we're looking to make is, take you from kind of that DevSecOps where, you're trying to patch and stay on top of everything to, and you're going to have to, but being a little bit more strategic on what mountain you start on first.
Which is key because
Yes.
obviously, especially in the healthcare industry, we're going to be asked to do more with less.
Yes.
Right? Like a good example is it. My longtime listeners know my boss's boss, Jim Kipoff, has challenged our
Yeah.
team. Right? Like we just did a acquisition recently. We're going to get bigger. We know that we're going to spend more money on taking care of the patients than we are IT. While IT is important, AI is important, in the end, it's still taking care of our patients is the key thing.
Right.
Where I'm going with this is that we know that our team is not going to exponentially, I haven't had lunch yet, listeners, so I apologize, exponentially grow, right, as we do more acquisitions and as our healthcare system gets bigger. So now he's challenged us, okay, what are more things that can be automated,
Sure.
right? Can we do more, even with the risk assessment world, can this be handled by AI? And then we can truly, go to this and this. With quantification, does that help drive some of that automation, right? Can I make decisions on what to automate first based on risk quantification?
Yeah, going back to the SAFE platform, so we really got our start in what we call CRQ But imagine, most of the companies that I work with do some sort of annual risk assessment. The CISO typically has to report up to an ERM or to the board, kind of the cybersecurity posture. And with that risk assessment usually comes along where there are deficiencies and where, you need to invest. So the beauty about SAFE is, a lot of that process is identifying risk, interviewing candidates to understand what the risk on the ground is, and then, kind of coming back and showing your reporting at the end. But what typically happens is you do all this work and then the CISO just goes, oh, it's kind of this gut feel of where they, need to invest, where they think they should invest. So kind of the first bread and butter solution of SAFE helps you build that program. So we're automating that program. Again, we're aligning to best standard framework. So when you get to the end, you have a result that, is kind of representative of all the good work that you've done in defining your risk program, but could also be used to justify where you put in spend and or where you invest in automation, where maybe you would seek the most benefit. And then that carries over to the third party side, which is another solution we launched earlier this year, where again, maybe on that cyber lens, you realize that IT TPRM was a weaker spot in your overall kind of core competency, or your risk in terms of third-party providers and potentially data exfiltration. If you're scoring weaker then maybe that's an example of now you're moving into our Singularity solution, where you're starting with our CRQ and you're also including third-party automation to help you, meet vendors at scale, meet the business at scale, and also making sure you're doing so with, good security practices in mind.
Excellent. All right, well, I know we're running up against it, so I do want to ask a basic question, right?
Oh God.
So before someone reaches out to you to make a call to talk about it,
Yeah.
what is some advice you would have to a company that before they call you, before they have any conversation with you, what kind of homework would you, like pre-meeting homework, would you want them to do to be ready for that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, always our website has a variety of information in which you can learn about our company. We're a very transparent company. You can even go on YouTube, see our internal keynotes, just to get a taste of not only our product, but the people that you'll be building relationships with. And then ultimately, just be ready to, kind of transform, right? Like we're going to help you with the product side of things, but, come into it with a positive state of mind of wanting to learn, wanting to transform, wanting to partner. I think the best times is, when customers come to me and, maybe they have a success criteria in mind, but oftentimes they don't, because a lot of people aren't using AI today, or they're not quantifying their risks today. So they want to know what is best practice and what is the art of the possible. So just kind of having a learning outcome or mindset that we're partnering together. And I'll be frank, there's not a lot of people that are quite doing this, right? Because a lot of people do what's, in the frameworks or regulators say they need to.
Yep.
So there's
Check in the box.
check in the box. So there's no wrong answer. We're all learning together, and so just coming to the table to want to partner are my favorite types of conversations.
Excellent. Well, normally at this point in the podcast is where I would do like a marketing pitch, but guess what? I think that if you listen to this entire podcast,
Yeah.
we don't need the normal sales pitch for when we do. I do want to thank both of you. There's someone behind the scenes right now who you can't see, for helping out with CloudCon this year. You guys' money helped with a donation to the autism support of Kent County, so it is much, much appreciated, especially being the parent of an autistic child, an awesome autistic child. I guess any parting thoughts or advice to anybody as they begin their GrC journey in 2026?
Yeah, just get started. I meet a lot of customers that think when it comes to risk quantification, which again is something that we specialize in, is that they need to be doing it today. They need to have the data. They need to have it figured out, and you don't. I think you're just kind of putting off the inevitable, and we're all learning together. So the biggest thing is to get started, and it's probably better than your heat map today. Yes, I'm probably calling your baby ugly, but it's has to be better than what you're doing today, even if it's incremental in your learning. So just get started, and I think that's probably it.
Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure talking
Yeah,
with
nice
you.
speaking with you.
In the most interesting backdrop. Hopefully this wasn't too intimidating.
No, this is bringing me back. So I actually went to Grand Valley State University. So it's kind of nostalgic to be back in my hometown, back here during Art Prize, and being at the GrrCon. Very cool.
Excellent. All right, appreciate your time today.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.